Welcome to the Career Cube. Today we're talking with Kelsey Berg, a professional career coach who has over 20 years of experience on the front lines of HR for organizations big and small. Today we're talking with Kelsey about onboarding once you get your great new job.
This is the Career Cube, the podcast focused on helping you navigate the signals in your career to keep you growing and moving forward in business and in life. Here's today's host, Dana Redmond.
Welcome to the show, Kelsey.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, excited to have you here and talk about this topic. So let's jump right in. You got your new dream job, and then the question is, now what? How can somebody sort of onboard successfully?
Well, it's important to really, right from the beginning, think about what you want this to be for yourself, to really take ownership of it and think about how you want to set yourself up for success. What do you want to build your reputation on? What do you want to be known for? What do folks need to know about you? What are your guardrails, if you will, or boundaries, right? So expectation setting on your side so that you can have a successful career. So that's how I, right from the beginning, start being very conscious and deliberate about thinking about those things. Take ownership.
And why do you think that's so important for somebody?
It is about taking that ownership so that folks feel they don't sit back and think, okay, what's the company going to do for me? Or we'll just kind of take it ad hoc and see how it goes. There's so much that can be missed. And you are setting expectations. You are, impression building. And so it is important that you are conscious about that so things happen the way that you want to and you take charge of your learning in a way that you know works for you.
Right. I mean, that is so interesting, right? Your first impressions, it's not only sort of your first impressions that you have of the company and your coworkers, those are your very first days and the first impressions you're, relaying to your coworkers and your boss and your management.
Absolutely. And so often, it's happening whether we're conscious about it or not.
Right.
So how much better will it be if you're actually being deliberate and being thoughtful about it? You can really, really set the foundation for a great career, first 90 days, first year, and a great career.
Right. Yeah. And I've heard that term a lot, sort of the first 90 days. What is a timeline you think about for onboarding for someone?
Oh, that's a great question because it can vary depending on the size and the complexity of the organization. And I think it'd be very difficult, especially for folks as they get a little more experience behind them. They think they should just drop right in and add value immediately. And that's great. Most companies are hiring people who have high expectations for themselves. But you've got to be patient with yourself. You've got to give yourself the grace that you're new. It's a time that you get to not know it again. So take advantage of that. And as I say a lot, use your new card. And so I do believe or get a sense that there is this, first 3 months, you really are building that foundation. You're figuring out everything from first day, where the bathroom is, to how do I, fill an expense report, and then start digging into the business. But honestly, especially for larger organizations, I tell them full rhythm of the business, full year.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And it's not that you're not learning along the way. And, you look back after your first month, don't forget to see how far you've come. You look back after 90 days, see how much farther you've come. So give yourself credit, but also don't feel like I got it figured out. I know it all. Right. You don't.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting to think about that first 12 months as you're going through every new business cycle, whether it's whatever the budgeting cycle is for the company. The first time you do that's going to be a learning, even if it is on month 11, right?
Exactly.
You've been with a company. If it's your first time there, or especially if you're in any kind of like a retail setting, right? And you're fit your first holiday season with an organization that's in the retail space, right? You're like, whoa, hold on to your hats.
Exactly. So those are good first questions to ask. And even if you're in a more of a startup environment, so there's a lot less set around rhythm of the business.
Right.
And so timing may feel different. Expectations may feel even, sooner. But still really try to remember to give yourself that space to be new and understand. And that's actually a show of strength versus I have these questions, I'll find a way to figure it out and act like I know what I'm doing. People know.
Right.
And you can really respect, if you think about it for yourself, if someone comes to you and says, help me understand this, this is what I've done, but I need more information, that's actually, you typically respect that person.
Right, because they're asking for the help and figuring that out. And I do love that concept of giving yourself the space to be new, right? Use that new card as you call it, right?
Yeah.
And that's always a good
Why
one
not?
to pull out. Yep. Yeah. Because you don't get that for very long.
No. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, how would you recommend that someone approaches their onboarding?
Yeah. The work that I do with the folks that I help with this, I think there's three main areas if you were to break it down, and it is the admin part of it. There's the business, and then there are people and the connections. So if I start with the admin, those are the things I just, a little bit of what I just mentioned around what's the day-to-day workings? Honestly, what's the rhythm, right? Where is the bathroom? Honestly, it's a fair question.
Right,
Where's the kitchen? And things like getting your benefits set up. The things that, something like that, will have a deadline. Know what it is. Don't wait till the 29th day if you have the 30 days to do it. Those are important because if you don't get them out of the way, get the technology set up, it'll hound you, it'll follow you.
Right.
And then, a few weeks in, you're starting to have expectations around deliverables in business and you still haven't figured out how to get access to the tools you need.
Right.
So tools, benefits, start with that. Figure out very quickly where the help is for that. Right, if there is help,
right,
and pave the way. And I always tell people, if you're in an organization that you feel like there's nothing and you've got to figure it all on your own, then do that. But please do someone else the favor of writing it down and figuring it out, right? So the next person doesn't have to go through what you just went through.
Right, yeah,
So,
make that list of these are all the contacts,
Yes.
or this is how you get access. This is who you, email to get access to that particular server or that tool.
Yeah, pay it forward, right,
Yep.
for that next person.
Yep.
So, and don't discount the importance of that. Right, getting that stuff figured out. The business part of it, understanding the organization that you just became a part of. Many organizations will have an orientation of some kind, and hopefully they've included some of that, but it usually tends to be pretty high level. So what's the strategy of the organization? Why are they there? What's the end game? I've worked for startups that the end game from the very beginning has been to get themselves in a position to sell, right? That's okay, right? So understand what the strategies are, understand how your organization, how your leadership, and then how you and your team ultimately fit into that. So understand lots of clarifying questions, key challenges, right? Again, that rhythm of the business, that kind of thing. So dig into that. Culture and history, be respectful of it. Understand it, right? Kind of know how you fit into that. And then the people and connections. And even with that, you've got, we talked a little bit about those. Here's yourself. What do you want to be known for? What are you going to build your reputation on? What are the goals and values that you need to honor that are yours, right, as you go into this? Really, really critical as manager.
Yeah.
Right? Your relationship with your manager is typically pretty key to being happy and being successful. Right. So things like what's their style and rhythm. You can figure it out. You can take the next 3 months to figure out, right? Jen, if you're my manager, how does she like to be communicated with? Does she hate email, love email, never answer it? But why not ask, right? So set up time, recurring time. A lot of companies use one-on-one. And they use that for work. That's fine. Use it for the deeper things, getting to know each other, feedback, communication loop, all of that.
Right.
So that's a big piece of it. And then there's kind of everyone else. Who are your key partners, the influencers, your key decision makers, peers, all of that. Get to know them early and keep building. The example I use on that is it's like the rings of a tree, if you will. You start really tight, right? Manager, team, those folks, and then you just keep building out. And it in some ways, it never ends.
Right.
Always build that.
Right.
Yeah. In this day and age, people are successful through people.
Right. And it does feel like in a company, large or small, you continue to meet people and, learn their roles or learn what they're doing. So it's true. I think that your circle or your tree rings just continue to grow from there.
Yeah. And it starts with the job, right? And it starts with your learning. And then over time, it grows out to your career. Because that's how things happen, especially in this day and age, especially, in different regions in the Seattle area. Very connected place, very open environment for it, so use it to your advantage.
Right. Yeah. How do you recommend somebody manages all of this? If they want to focus on admin, they want to focus on the business learning and the people, are there tools to use? How would you say somebody could, sort of put a plan in place and, manage that?
Yeah. There's lots of tools out there, and I don't have one to 100% recommend. What I would say overall is be organized about it. You don't have to have a 10-page checklist if that's not your style, right? But it may help to write some of this down in some way so that you are not missing anything. And a lot of organizations, even very small ones who aren't that organized, usually will have something, or you can definitely find it. But just know what the approaches you want to take and how you're going to do it. And I really do think writing some of it down and having a plan and a timeline will help.
Right. Yeah. Some level of, hey, within my first 30 days, these are the things or the people I think I need to meet or the things I need to learn about. And even then think about your 60 to 90 days, right? Because I think that you can say, okay, I don't actually need to know everything about budgeting if budgeting is 6 months off, right? I can give myself a little, that going back to that, giving yourself some space, right? I can give myself some space to learn what's immediate and then sort of plan that out. And I know for somebody like me, that gives me some solace or some calmness that I don't need to know everything right away, right? If I can say, okay, that can come in my 60 to 90 days at an organization.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where you use your people, you use your management to learn that. So those are great first questions. Another really great question is, how, manager, are you going to measure my success on onboarding? You know, how do I know when I've been successful in my first 30, 60, 90 days? What that does is foster great conversation. And sometimes managers have a hard time answering that because they haven't thought about it that way. Right. But what a great way to kind of build it together and be able to influence it.
Right. So that sounds like you would recommend definitely sharing your onboarding plan, at least with your manager. Would you share it with other people or?
Absolutely. Yeah. If you have the opportunity. So definitely with manager, a lot of organizations are moving to like a peer mentor or a buddy type. So someone other than the manager that can help you learn the day-to-day. If you have the opportunity to have someone like that, and it doesn't have to be an overly formal relationship, but right, those people you can go to, share it with them. This is what I'm thinking. This is who I've met with so far. Who would you add to it? You know, where should I spend my time? You have to. That is using your new card, asking those questions.
Right. Yeah. And it can be super impactful. I think if you're sharing with your manager or somebody else, you can say, "Hey, these are the things I think I need to know," and they may say, "No, you can actually delay learning that bit of it, but here's what's immediate." Right? We've got this product launch in 2 months, so you really do need to get up to speed on this piece of it versus something else, and that can then help you, sort of plan your onboarding as well. So how do you think that an onboarding plan, say, differs either by sort of career stage, or I'm actually thinking, if you are coming in as a manager of a team versus coming in as an individual contributor, do you think there's a difference in that onboarding or how you should think about approaching it?
It's a really good question, and I feel like it's kind of like a yes and a no, right? So especially if you're going to be in a leadership role, it does change things because you're not just responsible for yourself. You're responsible for your team. So then you have to add on to, how do I want to position what's my style with my team? How do I want to position myself? What do I need from them? How are we going to work together? So there's a big additional chunk around leadership if that's going to be the case. When I work with folks who are more senior, it's almost harder on them because they do have that expectation that they should know more, be able to just drop in, plug and play. So I think it becomes more around having them recognize that this is really an opportunity to learn. There's a lot of talk around mindset, and there's a book that Carol Dweck did that talks about mindset, about having a learning mindset. This is a great place to apply that. So it's for everybody, but as we get more experienced and senior in our career, let yourself enjoy the experience and be new and not know everything.
Right. Yeah. That's so impactful because you have to come in with that mindset of clearly you were hired for a reason. They saw some experiences or talents or core competencies that you have that, that's what they were hiring you for. But at the same time, you're in a whole new organization or a whole new product or, so you need to learn that and, sort of finding that balance of trying to add value plus then learning at the same time so that you can eventually be even more impactful.
Yeah. And rely on what you know because, as you said, you were hired for some great skills, background, experience, right? They chose you and probably went through a pretty, arduous process to get to choosing you. So rely on what you know and don't second-guess yourself. Let those kind of negative voices in our head get in our way, push them to the side. Rely on what you know and learn what you need to and want to.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, Kelsey, let's take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk about, new employee orientation that companies have and how somebody could, take advantage of that.
Great.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes at thecareerq.com, where you can also subscribe to the podcast and sign up for our newsletter.
Welcome back. Kelsey, it's glad to be speaking with you about onboarding. So I want to chat a little bit about most companies have new employee orientation. So how can somebody sort of take advantage of that at the same time as trying to manage their own onboarding?
Yeah, good question. And the first thing I would say is go. Attend. Because it's funny to me so often when I work with folks, I'll ask, did you attend the onboarding? And they're like, no, I was too busy or I got information from other people. Please avoid doing that because you are going to get some of this admin information that you need. You're going to understand how to complete things like benefits that will haunt you if you don't do it. So first of all, go. Take good notes. Really listen to understand what they're trying to tell you. They do tend to be, I'm speaking in generalities here, but they tend to be higher level. If you're fortunate, you may have an organization that brings in one of their VPs for an organization or a leader, something like that, which is great. It's an opportunity to shake their hand, get to know them, and begin that people and network building. Right. And then know where you want to take that because you probably will walk out of there and on your notes, you're going to have questions that you want to follow up with. Right? Or I want to spend more time with this person. Or I want to get to know what they do. So use it as the launching of your learning and then take your questions forward from there.
Yeah, I like that kind of concept that use it as your launching pad. And especially most of those things are run either by an HR organization or by, some centralized organization of the company. So you can get some of that, as you talked about, just that administrative stuff out of the way. Yes, how to sign up for benefits. And some of that I think about, the signing up for benefits is something a manager or somebody hasn't had to do in a long time. Or, when you first, some of that new hire paperwork, if they've been there a long time, your manager won't really be able to tell you where to go or what to do. So you need to rely on that new employee orientation, right?
So true. And you mentioned something too, just maybe a little plug for HR here for a minute.
Yeah.
Lots of people think about HR as, I need them when I need help or I'm in trouble or whatever. HR in the beginning can be so incredibly helpful, not just for the benefit-y type of things, but they're going to have their own perspective on culture and what it takes to be successful. They work with successful, high-potential people, and they also work with folks who are not. So make some connections and build some relationship with your HR team there. It is a really nice relationship to have throughout your tenure at any company. And as an HR professional, I appreciate it so much. And it makes me want to do even more for that person. So it's an important one. I just got to put that plug in there.
I love that. That's an interesting, that most people probably would not think about is being sure you know who your HR contact is and reaching out to them in addition to, who your manager is, who your peers are, all your stakeholders will be. I like that. Yeah. So when should someone start thinking about their onboarding process? Is it day one, they walk in the front door? Is it day 5 after they realize they don't know what they're doing? Like, what do you think?
It's the minute they say yes. It really is. So when they walk in the door, they have an idea. It really does start with they want to be known for what they're going to immediately start building their reputation on and what those boundaries are for them. Those need to be day one and very conscious. And so it starts immediately. And with questions, you've probably done a lot of research. I hope you have as you've gone, prepping for interviews and that. So how does this change now that you have the specific role? So have those questions in mind. So start right away.
Right. Yeah. So almost a continuation from the interview and the research you had done and the, knowledge you had built up to be successful in that interview. Keep going with that. Yeah. I like that. That. I think about this, and you've talked about, someone thinking about it from the time they say yes, right, and how they are driving their onboarding plan. But shouldn't a manager have an onboarding plan for an employee? Like, where does that line fall?
Yes. Yes, and we work with managers as well to help them kind of a list of, like, here's the top things, 10 things or more that you should be thinking about, how to make them feel welcome. So, yes, and hopefully that happens, but honestly, a lot of times it doesn't. Either the managers, they're not engaged that way. They feel like they're too busy. They're not thinking about it. They don't care about it. There's lots of reasons why it may not happen. But that goes back to personal ownership. This is about you, and you are being hired by a company to perform a job, services, and accomplish certain things, and part of that is learning and onboarding. So if you're going to sit back and say, what are they going to do for me in this area? It's going to be a tough go.
Right. So what can somebody do if it's not going well? So they've started this new job, they've started trying to onboard, and, maybe it's just not going well for them. It's not what they expected, or the onboarding isn't going as well as they expected.
Yeah. And that does happen, unfortunately. And so I think recognize it early. Listen to your intuition. Listen to your gut if you're feeling that things are off, and really figure out what that is. And don't hesitate to bring your manager, your leadership into it, which can be hard if they're maybe part of the issue, quite honestly. And sometimes it is, But, I'll talk to folks who are going through these kinds of problems, and they spend a lot of time trying to solve it on their own, or say, oh, no, it's not what it is. It's okay. I can deal with it. It doesn't necessarily work out. And then they're at the point of ready, they're going to leave. And what have you done about it? And they haven't even talked about it. So that's the communication piece of it, right? And saying, help me understand. This is what I'm feeling. Is this accurate? Right? Here's what I expected. Am I off on that? And come with solutions. So it's one thing to come with the concerns and the problems, but as much as possible also, here's what would help me. Here's what I need, right? And so it's just bringing up really early when the problem is, a molehill, not a mountain.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about, that some people might think, oh, it's me, or, oh, I've got to figure this out, right? Everybody else looks to be successful here or doing it.
Right.
But how did I miss something, right?
Right.
And I love that idea. Don't let it become the mountain.
Yeah.
And because it may become a mountain for you and nobody else knows it.
Exactly. And you're ready and heading out the door, and the manager's like, what?
Right.
Yeah, and truly that happens. I actually have to say that happened to me.
Oh.
Personally. My first job at Microsoft, I won't go into a lot of detail, but I learned a lot from my own experience and about taking ownership and bringing up. I almost missed out on a great 10-year career at Microsoft because of my onboarding. So this work is also really personal to me. So when I finally had that conversation with my manager, she literally had no idea. And it was actually really, really good after that. And all it took was a conversation.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I want to circle back on your sort of 3 points of an onboarding: the administrative part, the business part, and the people part. And I'm wondering if you think, are there either different timelines for each of those sections, or recommended different ways to approach that, or different people you should look to for each of those? Like if you're trying to learn all the administrative pieces of your job, like when would you expect that to be? Is that in your first 30 days? Is that something you push out? And who do you go to for that kind of help, you think?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it does kind of get munched together a little bit. The admin stuff, depending, again, as we said, the stuff that has deadlines and timelines around it. So we've mentioned the benefit piece of it. Typically, organizations will have training, that initial legalized trainings, different things they need to address right away. Find out what are the things that have timelines about them. Get them done as soon as possible, because as you're rolling into your job, you're only going to get busier, right? The work is going to take place. The deliverables are going to start to be expected. So that, as much up front of that as possible. The rest of it is mixed. It's not a straight line by any means. I think the way that I would encourage people to think about it, their learning, is to bucket it by, what are they learning on the job? What are they learning by doing, right? What are they learning through others, right? And then what are they learning through the necessary trainings or research and reading? And have a good mix of those 3 approaches to it. And the on-the-job and the people are going to be a much larger percentage than, taking the classes or, reading and that kind of thing. So I would be more concerned about the mix of your learning. And if you go and think, oh, I'm just going to take all these classes and I'm going to be done, probably not. Right. Because you missed a big, huge section of it.
Right. So I like that. So the on-the-job training and learning from others, you think, is a higher percentage, and then sort of a lower percentage is some of those prepared training courses, that kind of stuff. Right. And that's a great way to think about it, too, I think, is of those three, if you put sort of those experiences or you're putting your timeline in place, that's a great way to sort of stack those out into, okay, what do I think I'm going to learn on the job in this, within this timeline? And that might go back to some of the rhythm of the business, and you won't be able to learn on the job training about a particular part of the business until the business cycle happens.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the being patient and knowing things are going to take time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I like that. So it's on the job training, learning from others, and then trainings and readings. And it feels like a lot of times I think about, onboarding or learning. You immediately think, is there a training course I can take? Mm-hmm. Is there a book I can read? A TED Talk I can watch? Something like that.
Right.
And what I hear you saying is, that's a small percentage usually.
Great.
Right.
But a small percentage, right? Who knows that? Who has the skill?
Yeah.
Right? Or who knows this work that I can go and spend some time with? That's a great way to learn, right? Or, knowing what your deliverables are from your manager, digging into it, getting the help, getting the people help, right? So that's kind of a mix of on the job and people. So, yeah.
Right. So have you ever seen onboarding gone wrong? What does that look like, and how can somebody recover from that?
For sure. Absolutely. It's I wish I would say I never see that. But sometimes expectations are not what they were, right? The job changes, managers change. So there's a lot, or you just are struggling. Either, the learning is not there, you don't understand what you're expected to know, or there's personality issues going on. All of those things can happen. I think the key there, again, is to really address it early. Right? Mm-hmm. And listen to your intuition about what's going on and bring it up, right? Talk to your manager about it, that kind of thing, so that you don't let it get out of hand.
Okay. Great. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, as we close out here, what would be your top few tips on onboarding? If somebody, was like, okay, I just started my new job, where do I go from here? What are your top tips just to get started?
Top tips: relationship with manager. Right? Setting expectations with your manager, deliverables, right? Success measures, and networking, people.
Love it.
Yeah.
Kelsey, this has been a great conversation. As we start to close out, I want to jump into some of the questions that we always ask our guests that I find so interesting and love this part of the conversation. Okay. So what was your first job?
My very first job, my parents had a janitorial business. And so starting in 8th grade, after school and homework, we'd go out and we would clean businesses. So not glamorous. But in a lot of ways, I have some really fond memories. I learned how to work hard, right, and meet commitments. And as we got a little older, my girlfriends and I would go out on our own, and we'd go do our work. And then we have, oh my gosh, I have some great stories about learning how to drive in parking lots and stuff like that. So yeah.
Neat. And so you feel like that, did that give you, do you ever reflect back on that and think about that in your current roles?
I do, because I at the time, I was not always loving it. As a teenager, having to do cleaning. Right. But I'm so appreciative for what it taught me around work ethic. I want to mention, too, that my first HR job was for a seafood company in Seattle, and that, too, was incredibly fun. I was all over Alaska, the Bering Sea, Dutch Harbor, met some incredible people, and I have some amazing stories. So it was really fun, raw HR, and that's what made me fall in love with it.
Have you listened to or read anything lately that you'd want to share with our listeners?
That's interesting. I have, but to be quite honest, it's not related to HR and onboarding. I'm really focused right now on a couple of things. One, I mentioned the book on mindset. Mm-hmm. There's another book, The Brain That Changes Itself, and it's about neural pathways that are created due to our experiences and how we can change that. So, tough things happen to people, and there's things like PTSD, right? But then what do you do about that? Mm-hmm. And I'm also focused, I just started reading a book called The China Study around heart disease and eating style. So I'm more kind of in that, to be quite honest with you, where my reading is right now.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I like that idea about the, brain changes itself, right?
Yeah.
And you do hear a lot about sort of mindset and sort of where does that come from? And you hear about like grit and how important is grit in sort of teaching our youth and teaching our children about, right? And that
true.
piece.
Yeah,
So.
and recognizing, through our experiences, these pathways in our brains get created and we kind of fall into them. They're like, I imagine them kind of like just like tunnels, right, or big channels. But they can be negative ones based on experiences.
Right.
And so that warrants acknowledgement and respect, but then you can change those. You can create new neural pathways the way that you want to, so it helps with anxiety, right, and the way that you approach things. And that can even be in a new role. It is changing jobs is one of the most stressful things you can do. Right? And a lot of times when they're changing jobs and they've relocated, right? Big move for that job. And it's amazing how many people I talk to who also just happen to get married at the same time or getting married. Right? So recognizing big, huge things, right, that are impacting you. So
yeah. And that is interesting to think about. A new job, if it's a new city, it's a new city for you. But then if you've got family that's come with you, it's all of that new, a spouse that maybe now needs to find a new job or children that are starting new schools and stuff. So there's a lot of family stress around that possibly too.
Yeah. So just acknowledge that for yourself and let it kind of just be. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So, Kelsey, what would your 90-year-old self say to you right now, right today?
Not to be too cheesy, but I really think it is like, were you happy? Did you influence other people's lives in a positive manner? And are you happy with the choices that you made?
Right. I love that. So it's about being happy, right?
Yeah.
Are you pleased with yourself and content where you are?
Exactly.
Great.
Yep.
I love that. Kelsey, if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about you, where can they find out more information about you?
I would point people to my LinkedIn, Kelsey A. Berg, LinkedIn. All my contact information's out there. So, yeah, I love it.
Well, Kelsey, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming in and talking about onboarding and giving our listeners some tips and tricks on that.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Great. It's been great to have you. So for all of our listeners, check out thecareerq.com to read the show notes and for more information about onboarding.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to head on over to thecareerq.com where you can get more information, show notes, and related articles to today's topic. Also, if you like what you're hearing, head on over to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a rating and a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again.
The Career Q podcast is produced by Lens Group Media and recorded at Jack Straw Cultural Center in the lovely Seattle, Washington.